Welcome to the Pathways to Aviation Career Symposium. It's a week-long celebration of aviation careers. We're doing this every day, 4 different activities. We open with a conversation with JS Firm about job announcements. Then we move into a career panel, then our live interview, and then we close it with career tips. And today, we have a special guest. And the name of the organization is the Perlan Project. We've met him in person down at the Minden Tahoe Airport several years ago. We saw him at the Reno Air Races. We watch every time they go on a mission, we watch them participate in their mission. And they're a lot of fun to watch and follow and meet. They have opportunities for young people. So I want to get right into it and introduce Ed Warnock and Dan Gudgel to our live interview and to all of you watching right now. Perlan Project. Guys, what can you tell us what it is?
Thank you, Pete. Let me start off if that's okay, Dan. The Perlan Project is started off to be an improbable, ambitious idea. Could you fly a glider, an airplane with no engine at all? Could you fly it higher than a commercial aircraft? Could you fly it higher than the Concorde ever went? Could you fly it higher than the U-2? Could you fly it higher than the SR-71? And it was started by a former NASA test pilot, Adar Enevoldsen, and he was doing some work with the German Space Agency, the DLR, in Germany, and he saw a picture posted on a bulletin board of a LiDAR picture of something going on at 100,000 feet that looked like waves. Now, Adar was a glider pilot, flew gliders recreationally and in competition, and he did some quick calculations and said, my gosh, if I could ever get an airplane up to that altitude, those waves at 100,000 feet are soarable. And so that started the Perlan Project. And that was back in the 90s, and we have been working for 30 years to make Adar's dream come true. Now we've beat the commercial aviation fleet. We've beat the Concorde. We beat the altitude record set by the U-2 when we flew to 76,000 feet. The only one we've got left to check off is we got to get to above 85,000 feet, and we'll beat the altitude record claimed by the SR-71. Now that's the project in a nutshell. And we can't do the project without the meteorologists who help us forecast when these stratospheric waves are going to exist. So let me introduce Dan Gudgel. Dan is the team meteorologist. He goes with us to these flights in South America. We have to go to the tip of South America to find these giant waves. And Dan goes with us. And every day Dan gives us a weather briefing and he tells us, are you going to be able to fly high in the stratosphere today, or is today a good day to do maintenance on the airplane? And then on the day of the flight, Dan directs the airplane to the best possible location to find just the waves we need to surf these waves up to incredible altitudes. So Dan, introduce yourself.
Well, like Ed gave me a little credit here, but basically you're looking at me as an individual, but really there's a team of meteorologists that are supporting the Perlan Project. The research meteorology and guidance on some models is provided by a couple of entities. We have Elizabeth Austin working there in Weather Extreme in Reno, Nevada. We have Matthew Scudder, who assists kind of unofficially, but nonetheless, he does assist with his modeling from around the world. We have Stormy Knoll, who is a research meteorologist working with Elizabeth there in the Reno area. And then Walt Rogers is a compatriot of mine out of the National Weather Service. And he and I are both kind of biased because we're both pilots and glider pilots. And so we're into the soaring aspect. When I was introduced to the Perlan Project and asked to be on it, my forte really is on-site meteorologist to provide not only the outlook, in other words, evaluating what the models say to see whether it's reasonable to soar in these high altitudes in the stratosphere, essentially. But I also have tactical issues at the surface. Can we launch? Can we recover? So that's down in the troposphere, more attuned to the, shall we say, routine weather briefing type of information for decision-making for safety of flight. So there's a variety of aspects where the meteorology ties in. As far as directing the glider aloft, when we get them into the stratosphere, because we have, I refer to it lovingly as the beast, as Ed knows. We have a turbine-powered aircraft that tows them up to the lower part of the stratosphere, certainly at the tropopause. And then from there, we're trying to work the stratospheric wave. Where the wave originates from, we know that it gets a little bit excited from perhaps some terrain augmentation, but we also have indications that it could be just a little bit of excitation out over the Pacific from various types of meteorological phenomena that starts this wave feature to going. And I can tell you as a meteorologist that in the troposphere, where airplanes typically fly, terrain does start the mountain wave phenomenon. In the stratosphere, and by the way, that terrain started phenomena typically damps out with distance downstream from the range. In the stratosphere, it's a little bit the opposite. It gets a little perturbed and it starts to vary. And at first thing you know, the amplitude on this wave gets bigger, and our threat is can it break? But as it gets bigger, it gets some phenomenal lift and correspondingly sink associated with it. So our best guess, being above the active weather in the atmosphere, is to steer the Perlan aircraft, best guess, toward where we think the lift is, and then they turn into a true exploratory aircraft.
So, Pete, let me say something about the reason we want to go up there. This is not just a weekend glider ride to say, let's go out and fly a glider for fun. This is serious scientific research. These giant waves, occasionally, Dan said they break, they turn into white water up in the stratosphere. They mix the stratosphere, and that has an impact on the global weather models that meteorologists use to determine if it's going to rain or what the weather is going to be. The mixing of the stratosphere is part of it. We're also flying in a set of conditions that approximate the planet Mars. So we're demonstrating, could a winged aircraft possibly be useful on the planet Mars? We are a living workshop to say, well, let's see how our airplane worked, and that'll be an indication of whether or not it'll work on Mars. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I kind of want to dumb it back just a little bit. And I know you have something to show, but to kind of describe both of you what gliding is like. And I'm a guy who's not a pilot. What is that experience like? And you know, maybe show your video to kind of illustrate it, but maybe just give us a description of gliding in its basic form.
Well, the atmosphere has vertical motion, both up and down. And the scale of that vertical motion is something that the gliders can fly on. A true soaring aircraft, say, has a sink rate, just off the top of my head, of one type, around 200 feet per minute. Well, in the atmosphere, around thunderstorms and other very strong lift mechanisms, you can have in excess of 2,000 feet a minute. So it's easily doable by an aircraft to ride the vertical air motions in the atmosphere. The Perlan aircraft itself is operating up there in the stratosphere. According to modeling, we can hook them up with 10 to 20 knot lift rates. That's 10 knot is 1,000 feet a minute. To 20 knots is 2,000 feet a minute, and they only have a corresponding sink rate of around way up there, about 700-800 feet a minute. So that's all plus. That means that glider can actually climb, sort of like, look, Ma, no engine, and up they go. So we're using the atmosphere as an engine in various forms of lift. In this case, for the Perlan aircraft, it is stratospheric wave lift. But there are other types of lift down in the troposphere. And in fact, one of them is the the classic ridge lift. If the wind doesn't blow, there is no ridge lift. And everybody thinks about that. Well, the wind's not blowing, the glider can't fly. That's not true. If you have a rising bubble of air like dust devils on a hot summer day, that little column of air supports good enough vertical upward motion that will support a glider climbing.
One of the questions is, what's it like to do that?
Okay.
It is, I guess I'd have to say it's the closest thing to heaven that I've ever been. It's the closest thing to being a bird. It's the closest thing to pure flight, except maybe the ambitious people that jump off cliffs with nothing but you know, a hang glider. They're maybe one step closer. But for those of us who like a seat to sit in and a stick to hold on to, it's a thrill to see the altimeter getting higher and higher and higher and recognize you're not burning an ounce of gas. It turns flying into, instead of transportation, it turns it into poetry and a sport. The sport of soaring is, can I find those upward lifting air, which are many times invisible? Can I find them and keep this aircraft in the air? So it turns a day of flying into something that is thrilling. Somebody said that if the language of Earth was aviation, then soaring would be our poetry. So it's fun. I can't explain it in any other way than if you want to have fun, go soaring.
I love it. And I know that there's a soaring association at the Minden Airport. There's one up in Truckee, and there are all these other airports. But if I'm a young person who's never done this before, what recommendations do you have? What are ways that they can get involved and maybe take a test flight? What can you share?
Well, the Soaring Society of America here in the United States and around the world, you have various countries have their clubs perhaps, but let's just focus here as a quick reference. They have soaring sites that are around the country that you can go and find a club they'll bend over backwards to introduce you to soaring. Everybody likes to show how much fun they're having with it and the sense of accomplishment. And I did that clear back in 1976, of all things, right there in Minden, Nevada. An airline pilot who loved to fly on the weekends took me for a soaring flight.
Yep.
And so it's a lot of fun.
Yep. So you can solo a glider at age 14. So many kids get their first introduction to flying in a motorless airplane. And you might think, well, isn't that dangerous? And the answer is no. You know, if the biggest worry that many pilots have is the engine will quit. Well, in a glider, that's already happened. So you're left with pure flight. And you soon learn, don't get any further away from the airport than you can glide back. And it's a wonderful way to get introduced to aviation. The Air Force Academy starts pilots off in gliders. And they say, before we're going to put you in a jet, we're going to teach you the pure flying. We're going to teach you the joy of flying. And to do that, we're going to take you and get you a glider flight, and you'll become a glider pilot. So at age 14, you can take a couple of glider lessons. It probably takes about 10 hours of lessons for the average person to have the instructor get out and say, the airplane's yours. And they'll tow you up into the sky, and you'll release the tow rope. And at age 14, you'll be the closest to a bird that you'll ever be.
It's a good way to develop responsibility, you know, as a young person. I mean, you're already handling a machine as a solo student legally. Unlike other folks, you got to wait till you're 16 in a car. The other thing too, another source is a young person could be involved with the Civil Air Patrol, and they'll go through and teach you a little bit of discipline and so forth. But also you can be around aviation on somebody else's nickel. You go through, they'll introduce you to that as a means to get people interested in aviation.
Oh, I love it. So kind of along the same lines, I know you guys work with young people, maybe offer programs to get involved, volunteer, intern. Is that something you guys continue to do? And if you do, what does that look like?
Well, we've got 4 ways, Pete, to get young people involved. Every time we travel to South America, we take 3 interns with us. So it's not a huge number, but we integrate them into the team. They're full members of the team. They're not just people that come along to observe, but they take charge of scientific instruments. They help launch the airplane. They help prepare the airplane for flight. And the interns, we pay their way to South America. Now, we don't pay them any money, but it's an expense-paid trip to the tip of South America, to Patagonia. And when we're not flying, we explore glaciers and the mountains of Patagonia. The second way we do it is we have classrooms build experiments that are in the CubeSat format. And we fly CubeSats from schools all over the United States and Puerto Rico. And they build a science package that we then put in the airplane, and we carry it to 60, 70, 80,000 feet. And the students then can get the data back. Which brings me to the third way to get involved. We post all of the data online on the internet. And if your classroom would like to analyze anything from ozone concentrations to temperature changes to cosmic rays, whatever instrument we might have, the data is available to analyze. The fourth way is when we fly, we have what we call the virtual cockpit. It is an online site where we have a moving map that shows where the airplane is over the mountains. It's got instruments. It shows you the altitude. It shows you the airspeed. It shows you how much capacity is left in our batteries, the oxygen supply. It shows you the outside air temperature, all the instruments that the pilots have to fly the mission. You can be right with them in this virtual cockpit. And many classrooms follow along, especially if you've got an experiment on board. It's fun to see your experiment fly real time. So 4 ways to get involved.
That's incredible, because we work with a lot of schools, not just here in Northern Nevada, but throughout the country or world. And this is a program that we would love to promote to them. I'm assuming you're already in touch with a number of schools, but I think that'd be a fun way to kind of showcase you to them to bring in more classes.
Yep. So it turns out the interns are mostly college students, but the CubeSats are mostly built by high school students.
Okay. That was my next question, so I appreciate the audience for asking the age, because I'm interested. But since it's college age, I guess I'm ruled out.
Well, we would consider you if you are young at heart.
well, thank you. So Eric and I follow your missions, and he gets excited about this stuff too. What's next?
Well, maybe a way to answer that is with a short sentence, and then this might be the time to show the video of what it's like to work with Perlan.
Perfect.
And what's next is our aircraft has a design ceiling of 90,000 feet. And we've flown it to 76,000 feet. We would like to go that last distance. And if we get to above 85, we will become the highest flying crewed aircraft in history that's wing supported. If you put the plane on its tail and use thrust, you can go higher, but flying level on its wings, the highest claimed altitude is 86,000 feet, 85,000 feet and change. And we have this ambition to beat that record with no motor at all. The SR-71 has engines powerful enough to drive the Queen Mary ocean liner, and they have to fly in the thin air. They have to fly at about 2,500 miles an hour just to make the wings work well enough to keep them airborne. We would like to prove that by harnessing the power of nature, you can get up there in a glider.
You know, you need to put that a little bit more in perspective when we talk about how high we are in the atmosphere. The atmosphere has roughly 1,000 millibars worth of pressure in it here at sea level. That's representing the mass that's above us. 1013.25 is the old FAA, beat it in our head standard atmosphere. when the Perlan is flying up there at flight level 900 or pretty close to that target, there is only about 1.5% of the mass of the atmosphere left above us. We're at 98.5, or let's just say 98% of the mass of the atmosphere is below us at that altitude.
So another fun way to think about it, and this is for the shock value more than the scientific value, but there's something called the Armstrong limit, and it's at approximately 65,000 feet, depending on the day. But that's the place where the air pressure is low enough that your blood at body temperature would begin to boil. And they say an unprotected pilot at that point, all the moisture in your body would begin to evaporate. And we routinely fly above that altitude. So flying above the Armstrong limit is an aviation thumbs up experience, saying that's exciting.
Right, and I would imagine from Dan's perspective, when you eclipse 86,000, he's going to get a whole fresh new set of data to play with.
Oh, unbelievable. We are like a flying meteorological observatory, because we have, and one of the missions that was flown at our last foray down to El Calafate, Argentina, was a mission where there was an absolute no possibility of soaring. Just based on the meteorological aspects, the polar vortex was not active, but we went ahead and took a high flight up to the atmosphere, and we measured the parameters of the glider itself on the descent. We matched it up with descent rates and airs at appropriate different airspeeds, so we're able to get sync rates, and all of this combined to an absolutely solid aircraft performance polar. So what does that mean? So now in the future, when Perlan flies in the atmosphere, we have a solid baseline of information about the aircraft performance, that we now know what the atmosphere is doing, because we just subtract the aircraft polar from what we're observing, the aircraft's lift and sink.
Okay, wild. That's got to be incredible. Ed, do you want to show that little video you have?
Sure, let me share my screen. I will share the video. And this will let you know, as much as anything, what's the Perlan Project like.
There's science that's going on that cannot be done any other way. It can't be done with a balloon. It can't be done with a power engine plane collecting air samples.
As we're flying the airplane, we're gathering science data so that researchers can better understand the atmosphere.
AR's vision 10 years ago, he explained to me, was this should be a scientific research platform. This glider should operate for 20 years, regularly going to altitudes, with instruments from universities and people that just need to have an instrument taken up that high.
The achievement that is listed and recognized worldwide as the extraordinarily qualified. It's brilliant. And our volunteers, we do it because we love it. And it's just like so cool.
And we're trying to get some interns straight out of college and get them into our program.
Two of them now employees their best. These high altitude flights are done in southern Argentina, where the conditions are the best in the world. In southern Argentina, we have a phenomenon called the polar vortex, which helps the mountain wave go to very high altitude.
If we could fly higher than the SO-71 was able to maintain level 5, then we become not the highest flying subsonic airplane, which we would become the highest flying airplane, period.
Finally, we got the container here a couple of days ago. And now we can start assembling the glider and get ready for the first flight. We improved a lot of the instrumentation inside the glider, measuring the positions of the controls, the forces the pilot's putting in. The systems on board this glider are much more complex than any other soaring glider ever built.
What the eagle does is the eagle makes sure that every flight is a stratospheric flight. So we may have an airplane that could fly between 40 and 50,000 feet, pull in a load like the Perlan, and fly slow enough that we could actually stay with it.
Basically, connect the glider to the rope and we start a normal takeoff.
I can pull the power back a little bit and level off to just level, and then we can go to the areas where we think the lift is. Doesn't have to release and then descend trying to find the lift. We can let them go in the lift, which really can save a lot of time.
Where we're going is the coldest part of the atmosphere. And this isn't just industrial cold. This isn't walking into a freezer cold. This is planetary cold. This is surface of Mars cold.
And as we help in the future or science, what's going on with the ozone layer and many other things.
And from there, we can see what that lets us do. So hopefully that means safe high altitude flights, doing interesting research where no one else is.
It's a great achievement because what it tells you about the performance of the aircraft is that it's the best performing aircraft in history.
Wow, thank you for that. All right, Eric, did I do that right? All right, cool. So thank you for the video because that helped me out. And there was one question that was kind of percolating in my mind the whole time. You guys, the temperature ranges from cold, and at one point you say your body may start boiling. I guess you have to have pretty thick skin to be a pilot in that thing. A question came in through the chat. Tell me, how do you deal with Coffin Corner?
Well, Ed cited that they're targeting flight level 900 or 90,000 feet. I believe, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the engineer in there. The wing design, they believe, would take them up to 96,000, but in order to provide a little bit of a safety margin, plus or minus, I believe it's 2-3 knots on either side of the Coffin Corner convergence, they figured they better cap the flight at 90,000 feet. And up until now, I've got to give my compliments as part of the team to that part of the, this is not some, let's go get a record, all risk laid off to one side. This is a methodical United States Air Force type of mentality toward research and testing. And Jim Payne is no better example than that. So even though we had good lift conditions in the first foray down south, they're taking this thing in a stepwise projection. They get up, they analyze the data that they collected, come back down, engineering runs it through some tests to say, okay, we're cleared for the next hurdle. At this particular point, having reached 76,000 feet for our highest flight to date, we're now cleared to go ahead and jump up to flight level 900 because I just pointed out we're down to the last % difference between where we've been and where we think the aircraft can take it. So there's no reason now for stepwise, even though 14,000 feet sounds like a big jump. Realistically, as far as the mass of the atmosphere at this point, it's not. We're cleared to flight level 900 when the meteorology allows such a flight to occur.
Wow, that's I can't wait to watch that because Eric and I will be in the office just staring at our phones the whole time. So thank you for that.
There is a caveat to it also pursuant to your original question or point. The Perlan aircraft has a lot of redundant systems, a lot of it. Unfortunately, there is one major system that does not have any redundancy, and it's the most critical one. It is a pressurized cockpit. Minor leaks they can handle, but if there is some catastrophic failure in the Perlan cockpit, this is bad news for our pilots. So that's why ground Capcom, Ed, and the team are monitoring it very, very close because there's nothing we can do about that. The wearing pressure suits inside the cockpit was long ago determined by Einer and others that it's an impossibility. So it's got to be flown by somebody in reasonable clothes for cold, but other than that, it is a single point failure and it's a very critical one, right, Ed?
That's correct. But we've pressure tested the aircraft up to 2.5 times its operational pressure difference. So we have high confidence in the aircraft. We actually built 2 fuselages, and one of them we put through rigorous tests. So we decided that it was good to go.
Perfect. Well, you mentioned the 4 ways that somebody can get involved or a class can get involved. What are the ways that we can follow Perlan from this point forward?
There are Facebook, Twitter groups that you could join that would let you know when we are flying, and then the best way is to join the virtual cockpit. We also have a blog that on our website that once a month or so, it's worth going to see the new blog entries.
And I think you guys post every day during a mission too.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
The fact is, that's the notice when we're about ready to, early in the day, we'll make the determination whether they're going to do an attempt. Jackie and some of the others will put out a blog. There's your notice that the virtual web or the virtual cockpit's going to come up for the day.
Yeah, that's how I followed it. Okay.
So
Perfect.
one of the things I'd like to emphasize is Perlan is a team of volunteers, and the reason we do it is that this is the spice in the meal of life. Somebody said that the only unforgivable sin is to be given the gift of life and find it boring. So the people on the Perlan team, to make sure we're never bored with life, we volunteer ourselves to say, why don't we do something that will be technically very challenging, it'll be scientifically very valuable, and it'll just be a hoot. I mean, could you imagine beating the mighty SR-71 in a glider, with a bunch of volunteers? That's just, that's like sitting down, Pete, and saying, why don't we go to your backyard and build a spaceship? Why don't we beat NASA to the moon? It's a technological challenge, but it's one that a group of volunteers could take on. So we've done it for low budget with volunteers, and it makes life exciting.
Well, I think that's what makes it so exciting for us to watch, is that we get to know you, and we know all about the organization, that it's volunteer driven. It's pretty fun, it's pretty exciting, and it's almost the reason we brought you here today, not just the records you're setting and the people you have on the team, but the whole process. It's been fun for us to watch. We're going to continue sending you young people so that they can be introduced to Perlan and the whole world of gliding. And we're just thankful that Ed, you and Dan came on board today just to share a few things with us, describe Perlan to us, and see where you're going. Now we can follow you even more.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, and the work that you're doing will give us the next generation of explorers and engineers and mechanics and weather people, and it will make aviation exciting for the next 100 years since you're involved.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that, certainly. We're just looking to get you replaced.
Yeah.
All right, you two. You guys have a great day. Thanks again for everything. This has been a blessing.
Well, thank you.
Very good, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Pete.
Take care.